Ever feel like you're stuck in the digital dark ages when databases and SQL get mentioned?
Yeah, I get it.
It can definitely feel like everyone's speaking a different language, but not today.
Not today.
Today, we're diving deep into La Biblia del SQL
That's right.
to demystify this whole world of databases and SQL.
Yeah.
Think of us as your translators for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to break down the jargon, make it clear, and give you some actionable insights.
And you know the funny thing is,
Yeah.
databases, they really are the backbone of pretty much everything we do online these days.
Yeah.
Your shopping carts, your bank balances, when you check them online, even that movie you streamed last night, it's all powered by databases humming away behind the scenes.
It is, and they're super powerful. And that's where SQL comes in, right? It's our way of talking to these databases, telling them what we need.
Exactly. It's like having a conversation with your data. Now, La Biblia del SQL, it starts off with the fundamentals, talking about relational databases, or RDBMS for short. They're kind of like, imagine supercharged spreadsheets that can hold massive amounts of information and connect the dots between all that data.
Okay, so we're starting to get a picture here.
Yeah.
But how do we actually speak this language of SQL? What's the grammar involved?
Well, it's all about using SQL statements. These are basically the commands that you give to the database. And La Biblia de SQL, it really focuses on 4 essential ones: select, insert, update, and delete.
I mean, those sound pretty self-explanatory when you just say them out loud like that.
Yeah, they really are. Let's say we're talking about our sales team again. Okay.
Select would be like calling up their information. You're selecting specific data from that sales rep table. Insert, that's like adding a new team member to the table.
Right sense?
Update, that allows for changes like when someone gets a well-deserved raise. And delete, well, I think that one's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, that's when someone moves on to a different opportunity outside the database.
Exactly.
So it's like we have this control panel for all our data.
Yes.
And these 4 commands, select, insert, update, delete, those are like our main buttons.
That's a great way to put it. But just like learning any new language, it's more than just knowing a few basic commands, right? And that's where the real magic of SQL comes in, when you start building more complex queries.
Okay, let's crank it up a notch. What kind of questions can we ask with these more advanced queries? So imagine this. You want to go beyond just adding or removing data. You want insights.
Exactly.
With these advanced queries, you can filter your data, sort it, even do calculations on the fly. Let's say you want to find all the salespeople who are, for example, based in New York A&D, have a commission rate below 10%. An advanced query can do that for you in seconds.
So instead of me like manually combing through spreadsheets,
Oh, yeah.
I can get this targeted list ready to go with just a single query. That's powerful.
Exactly. And to fine-tune those questions even further, SQL uses these things called operators. They're like special symbols that add another layer of specificity to your queries.
Operators. Okay, now I feel like we're going back to math class here. Give me an example.
Okay, so you've got your logical operators like A and D or R and not. These let you combine different conditions to get super specific with your results. Then there are your comparison operators. Greater than, less than, equal to. Those are pretty intuitive. And then if you're feeling really adventurous, there are bitwise operators, but those are a bit more, let's say, niche.
Yeah, I think I'm good with my A and Ds and ORs for now.
Yeah.
But these operators, they do add a whole new layer of precision to SQL.
Absolutely. But you see, writing a really clever query, that's only half the battle. La Biblia de SQL actually dedicates a good chunk of its wisdom to database design, which is essentially the architecture of how your data is organized.
So it's not just about what you store, it's about how you organize it.
Exactly.
So why does a well-organized database, why does that matter so much?
Because a well-designed database makes sure that your data is accurate, it's easy to access, and it's efficient to use. It's the difference between walking into a well-organized library where you can find any book in seconds versus like a chaotic pile of books scattered everywhere.
I'll take that organized library any day.
Right.
So how do we achieve this data nirvana?
Well, there's this thing called normalization.
Okay.
And it's a set of principles that La Biblia del SQL outlines that help you structure your data to avoid things like redundancy and inconsistencies. Think of it like spring cleaning for your database.
Okay.
Making sure everything is in its rightful place.
I am always down for a good spring cleaning, especially when it comes to data. But I have a feeling this normalization thing can get a little bit complicated.
It can seem that way at first, but La Biblia de SQL has this great example with a plants table, and it shows how normalization can take messy, repetitive data and transform it into this streamlined, logical format.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the method behind the madness here. We've got SQL statements to manage our data, queries to extract specific information, and then this normalization process to make sure everything is nice and tidy and efficient.
You got it. And you know what? La Biblia del SQL doesn't stop there. It actually gives us some really practical tips that I think you'll find useful.
Practical tips, you say?
Yes.
Lay them on me. I'm all ears, especially if they're coming straight from La Biblia del SQL itself.
Well, one thing it really stresses is using short indexes for speed.
Okay.
And you can think of indexes like the index at the back of a book, right?
Right.
It helps the database find information faster. But if your indexes are too long, have too much unnecessary information in them,
Yeah.
they can actually slow things down.
So it's finding that sweet spot
Exactly.
of enough information to be helpful,
Right.
but not so much that it becomes counterproductive.
Exactly.
It's like a well-organized spice rack.
Right.
You want to be able to find the oregano quickly,
Right.
but you don't need a whole treatise on Italian cuisine.
Exactly. And speaking of finding that balance,
Yeah.
La Biblia del SQL also cautions against, going overboard with indexing.
Okay.
So indexes are great. They speed up searches,
Yeah.
but they also need to be updated every time you change the data.
Oh, okay.
So if you have too many indexes,
Yeah.
it can actually bog down your database with all these unnecessary updates.
That makes sense. It's all about efficiency, right?
Yes.
Getting the most out of our SQL queries without sacrificing speed or accuracy.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, does La Biblia del SQL, does it talk about security at all?
Oh, absolutely.
Because with all this talk of accessing and managing data,
Right.
it seems like security would be a major concern.
Hugely important. And La Biblia del SQL does not shy away from it.
Okay.
It's got a whole section dedicated to securing your SQL database, which is crucial, especially when you're dealing with sensitive information.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of security measures does it recommend?
Well, one of the key takeaways is to be very, very careful about who has access to what's called the user table.
Okay.
This is basically where all your usernames and passwords are stored.
Right. Makes sense.
The book actually strongly advises against giving anyone direct access to this table unless it's absolutely necessary.
Which would be almost never, I would assume.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It seems like a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that can be easily overlooked
Totally.
when you're kind of caught up in all the other technical details.
For sure.
So La Biblia del SQL does a really good job of highlighting these, really critical security practices
Okay.
in a very clear and concise way.
Yeah.
It also recommends this principle of least privilege,
Okay.
meaning you should only give users access to the specific data they need to do their jobs.
Yeah.
Nothing more, nothing less.
It's like that old saying,
What's that?
trust but verify.
Right.
Or I guess in this case, it's more like grant access, but only the bare minimum.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the essentials of SQL. We talked about some practical tips for optimizing our queries, database design,
All
and
right.
security measures.
Yes.
But I have a feeling that La Biblia del SQL, it goes even deeper than that, right?
It does.
There's more
Yeah, there's more to
to uncover. Okay, now you've got me really interested. What kind of, philosophical depths are we talking about here? Philosophical SQL. See, that's something I never thought I'd hear. What's so philosophical about a database language?
Well, it's about how SQL lets us interact with information on a really fundamental level.
Okay.
And La Biblia del SQL, it touches on some of these advanced concepts without, getting too bogged down in the weeds.
Okay.
For example, it talks about user-defined functions or UDFs. These are kind of imagine custom-built extensions to the SQL language itself.
Whoa, so we're not just using the existing SQL tools, we're creating our own.
Exactly.
That's next level.
Yeah, it's like having this workshop where you can build custom tools to work with your data in ways that standard SQL commands, they just might not allow.
Wow.
You're not limited to those predefined functions anymore. You can really tailor SQL to your specific needs.
That's incredible. What else does La Biblia del SQL kind of highlight on this philosophical journey?
Well, it also gets into this concept of transactions, which are
Oh.
basically these multi-step operations that have to be completed as an all-or-nothing deal
Okay.
to keep your data in good shape, to keep its integrity.
Okay.
Think about, transferring money between bank accounts.
Okay.
You wouldn't want money deducted from one account
Right.
without being added to the other, right?
Yeah, that's That's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. Transactions, they make sure that if any part of a multi-step operation fails, the whole thing gets rolled back, you
Right.
know? So it prevents any inconsistencies or data corruption.
So it's like a safety net for your database,
Yeah,
making
exactly.
sure everything stays balanced and accurate. It seems like La Biblia del SQL, it's more than just a how-to guide for SQL. It's kind of like this window into how data really shapes our world.
You got it. And,
Yeah.
we've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from basic SQL statements to advanced queries, database design principles, even touch upon security measures, and kind of gotten a peek into the more abstract side of this language.
Right.
And honestly, this is really just the tip of the iceberg.
There's so much more to explore
There is.
with the SQL.
Absolutely. And La Biblia del Sequel is a great place to start, a great place to keep learning. And as you continue your exploration, I want you to think about this. The book mentions fine-tuning your SQL code for maximum performance.
Okay.
But imagine if we could push that even further. Imagine databases that could actually learn from how they're being used and then optimize themselves, like on the fly without us having to do anything.
Wow.
How would that change the way we interact with data? What would the future of a self-optimizing data landscape look like?
Those are some really interesting questions and a perfect place to wrap up our deep dive today. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to La Biblia del SQL and other resources. Until next time.